generation warfare, 1GW, are tactics of line and column, which developed in the age of the smoothbore musket. Second generation warfare, 2GW, are tactics of linear fire and movement, with reliance on indirect fire. Third generation warfare, 3GW, are tactics of infiltration to bypass and collapse the enemy's combat forces, rather than seeking to close with and destroy them, and defence in depth. This was perfected by the Germans in World War II. Fourth generation warfare is conflict characterised by the blurring the distinction between war and politics, and of the distinction between combatants and civilians. Fifth generation warfare, 5GW, is warfare that is conducted primarily through non-kinetic military action, such as social engineering, misinformation, cyber attacks, along with emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and fully autonomous systems. Fifth generation warfare is less destructive and cheaper than previous generations of warfare. So is it more ethical? Only if you agree that the underlying reason for war is ethical. But because it's cheaper and requires less organisation, it's much more likely to be applied in situations which would not have resulted in conventional warfare. Psychological warfare, PSYWAR, or the basic aspects of modern psychological operations, PsyOp, is used to describe any action which is practiced mainly by psychological methods with the aim of evoking a planned psychological reaction in people in hostile countries. NATO calls psychological warfare hybrid warfare. Various techniques are used and are aimed at influencing a target audience's value system, belief system, emotions, motives, reasoning or behaviour. It's used to introduce confessions or reinforce attitudes and behaviours favourable to the originator's objectives, and are sometimes combined with black operations or false flag tactics. It's also used to destroy the morale of enemies through tactics aimed to depress troops' psychological states. Target audiences can be governments, organisations, groups and individuals, and it's not just limited to soldiers. Civilians of foreign territories can be targeted by technology and media so as to cause an effect on the government of their country. Mass communications allows for direct communication with an enemy populace, and has been used and therefore has been used in many efforts. Social media channels and the internet allow for the campaigns of disinformation and misinformation performed by agents anywhere in the world. After all, most social media began life as CIA-funded research projects. The United States ran an extensive program of psychological warfare during the Vietnam War. In Operation Wandering Soul, the United States used tapes of distorted human sounds and played them during the night, making the Vietnamese soldiers think that hungry ghosts were seeking revenge. Since the end of World War II, there have been over 70 regime changes orchestrated by the CIA, including assassinations. What has to be questioned is what it is within the American psyche which makes them believe that this is desirable and that they have the right to act in this way. State terrorism, a term rejected by the US government, is used to protect the interest of capitalist elites, and the US organised a neo-colonial system of client states, cooperating with regional elites to rule through terror. Interestingly, it's very often these elites that the US now finds itself in conflict with. The Jakarta Method, Washington's anti-communist crusade and the mass murder program that shaped our world, is a 2020 political history book by American journalist and author Vincent Bevins. It concerns US government support for and complicity in anti-communist mass killings around the world and their aggregate consequences from the Cold War until the present era. The title is a reference to the Indonesian mass killings of 1965-66, during which an estimated, and living in Indonesia, I'm not permitted to repeat the number, but it's big, people were killed in an effort to destroy the political West and movements for government reform in the country. In 2017, declassified documents from the US Embassy in Jakarta have confirmed that the United States government from the very beginning was deeply involved in the campaign of mass killings, which followed Suharto's seizure of power. Without the support of the US and its Western allies, the massacres would not have happened. The technology to support these regime changes is becoming increasingly sophisticated and opaque. The Arab Spring was a clear example of the use of this technology to create multiple regime change. You may recall it was much heralded that the protesters were openly using social media. 90% of Egyptians and Tunisians reported to Apol that they'd used Facebook to organise protests and spread awareness. It began in Tunisia in response to corruption and economic stagnation. From Tunisia, the protests then spread to Libya, Egypt, Yemen, Syria and Bahrain. Rulers were deposed: Zine El Abidine Ben Ali of Tunisia in 2011, Mohamed Gaddafi of Libya in 2011, Hussein Mubarak of Egypt in 2011, and Allah Abdullah Saleh of Yemen in 2012. Or major uprisings and social violence occurred, including riots, civil wars or insurgencies. Sustained street demonstrations took place in Morocco, Iraq, Algeria, Lebanon, Jordan, Kuwait, Oman and Sudan. Minor protests took place in Djibouti, Mauritania, Palestine, Saudi Arabia and the Western Sahara. Multiple large-scale conflicts followed the Syrian civil war, the rise of ISIS, insurgency in Iraq, and following civil war, the Egyptian crisis, election and removal of office of Mohamed Morsi, and subsequent unrest and insurgency, the Libyan crisis and the Yemeni crisis and subsequent civil war. Are the techniques of this psychological warfare? Increasingly, it's to spread information relating to the target regime. Often this is no longer targeted, as simply spreading disinformation makes the country more difficult to govern and develops opposition groups. This is now done through social media posts and increasingly on this very platform. Creating vlogs which pursue a particular agenda or promote a particular piece of disinformation can have a devastating effect on political regimes. Many of these are now AI generated, and their political bias and disinformation are often opaque. But it can include posts on vlogs pursuing a particular issue, often loosely related to the vlog. This happens to me increasingly as a content creator, and I certainly have identified what I believe to be Indian and Israeli state actors, perhaps surprisingly masquerading as hardline Muslims or, and I don't think I can say the word, Patinian supporters. In 2021, Israeli newspaper Haaretz revealed that Abu Ali Express, a popular news page on Telegram and Twitter purportedly dedicated to Arab affairs, was actually run by a Jewish Israeli paid consultant to the Israeli Defense Forces, IDF. IDF's PsyOp's accounts have been a source of a number of noteworthy reports that were afterwards cited by the Israeli and international media. In 1922, Meta and the Stanford Internet Observatory found that over 5 years, people associated with the US military who tried to conceal their identities created fake accounts on social media, including Balatarin, Facebook, Instagram, Odon Kalansky, Telegram, Twitter, Vonkatek and YouTube in an influence operation in Central Asia and the Middle East. Their posts, primarily in Arabic, Farsi and Russian, criticised Iran, China and Russia and gave pro-Western narratives. Data suggested that the activity was a series of covert campaigns rather than a single operation. In operations in South and East China Seas, both the United States and China have been engaged in cognitive warfare, which involves displays of force, staged photographs and sharing disinformation. Particular content can be promoted or restricted. You may have heard of shadow banning, which so many of us suspect we are victims of, but then we would. But maybe you have found your recommendations now seem to be very poor. From a mobile phone, it's possible to track and trace the owner, provided information on where the target lives and what they look like, even to understand the target's emotional state and profile them along with others. This then facilitates the listening in on and analysis of all communications using electronic media. This is also the means that social media. This also means that social media can be sent to the target and specific messages sent to them. Thus, the very social media the target consumes can be controlled via psychological warfare. This has proven to affect the beliefs of the target. Psychological profile is a method of analysing a person's characteristics to predict their behaviour. It can be used in a variety of contexts, including criminal investigations and marketing. But it moved from the criminal profiling to identifying terrorists to being used in psychological warfare. Behavioural profiling, also known as behavioural analysis or behavioural science, is a systematic process of examining, interpreting and predicting human behaviour based on observed patterns, actions and motivations. It involves the collection and analysis of data to uncover underlying behavioural traits and techniques aiming to provide insights into why individuals act in specific ways. Profilers rely on a diverse range of sources, including surveys, interviews, social media, online activity, and even physical observations. The choice of sources depends on the specific objectives of the profiling project. Behavioural data can be characterised into structured and unstructured types. Structured data includes quantitative information such as survey responses and numerical ratings. Unstructured data comprises of textual data, audio recordings, images and videos, which require more advanced analysis techniques. Before analysis begins, data must undergo a thorough cleaning process. This involves identifying and rectifying inconsistencies, errors, and missing values to ensure the accuracy and reliability of the dataset. Profilers leverage a wide array of tools and techniques for data analysis. Advanced statistical methods, machine learning algorithms, and data visualization tools play a crucial role in uncovering patterns and insights within the data. Data analysis is where the magic happens, as it involves sifting through the collected data to identify meaningful patterns, trends, and correlations. Profilers use statistical techniques and machine learning algorithms to analyse the data and extract actionable insights. Profiles of potential opposition supporters can be developed, and from this, social media targeted to them. But it's often used to generate a number of profiles and create tribes which may be opposed to or support each other. The British were one of the first major military powers to use psychological warfare in the First and Second World Wars. In the current British Armed Forces, PSYOPs are handled by the Tri-Services 15 Psychological Operations Group. The Psychological Operations Group comprises of over 150 personnel, approximately 75 from the regular armed services and 75 from the reserves. The group supports deployed commanders in the provision of psychological operations in operational and tactical environments. The group was established immediately after the 1991 Gulf War, has since grown significantly in size to meet operational requirements, and since 2015 has been one of the subunits of the 77th Brigade, formerly called the Security Assistance Group. In June 2015, NSA files published by Glenn Greenwald revealed that the JTRIG group at British Intelligence Agency GCHQ covertly manipulating online communities, in line with the JTRIG's goal to destroy, deny and degrade and disrupt enemies by discrediting them, planting disinformation and shutting down their communications. The 77th Brigade is a British Army formation created in January 2015 by renaming the Security Assistance Group. The present brigade's purpose is to conduct psychological operations. It's based at Denison Barracks in Hermitage, Berkshire, and became operational in April 2015. In 2015, the UK government said that the unit's objectives would be similar to those of the SAG. Specifically, it is to provide support to other government departments in the aim to achieve stability overseas, lead on special influence methods, build military capacity in all stages of conflict. In 2019, Laurie Clark in Wired described the brigade as a psychological operations unit responsible for non-lethal warfare that reportedly uses social media to control the narrative, as well as disseminating UK government-friendly podcasts and videos. Five Eyes is the intelligence alliance between the US, UK, Canada, Australia and New Zealand, and maybe with the possible exceptions of China and Indonesia, the response in these nations to the health crisis was amongst the most draconian. We naturally believe that our security services serve the national interest. But do they? Often the legal oversight of their activities is curtailed, supposedly to protect national interests. But could it more be about self-preservation and indeed growth of the service? Or even that they are more interested in promoting the interests of some companies, especially those that have been called surveillance capitalist, than those of all citizens of the nation? Also, is it wrong to see national security services monolithic? There are often disputes between branches and across organisations, such as the well-documented differences between the CIA and FBI in the late 1960s. Certainly there are increasing reports of services spying on supposedly friendly nations. WikiLeaks reported that the US National Security Agency tapped phone calls involving German Chancellor Angela Merkel and her closest advisors for years. The NSA targeted 125 phone numbers of top German officials for long-term surveillance. On the 22nd of April 2020, during the government's daily Congress briefing, General Nick Carter confirmed that 77th Brigade were working with the Home Office Rapid Response Unit, helping to squash rumours of misinformation, but also to counter disinformation. On the 7th of May 2020, The Economist interviewed Carter on the role of the 77th Brigade in fighting the Paderic disinformation. The Defence Cultural Specialist Unit was used to monitor the internet for content on C and to look for evidence of disinformation related to CVCs. An army source later told the Mail on Sunday that it was involved in monitoring the UK population. A Dutch health minister, Fleur Agema, called the sea pandemic a NATO military operation, noting that it was led directly by the North Atlantic Treaty Organisation and the Netherlands National Coordinator for Security and Counter-Terrorism, NCTV. And NATO themselves admit that throughout the sea crisis, they strengthened their cooperation with the European Union. And NATO and EU staffs exchange information on steps taken by both organisations to support NATO allies and their partners during the crisis. Seemingly innocent until you question why. Does this explain the authoritarian response amongst 3i members? Well, it almost certainly explains why Sweden, not then a NATO member, had a much more relaxed response. In fact, the authoritarian response was almost a perfect example of how to create fear, a byproduct of mistrust and anger, even trauma amongst target operation. Presumably this makes the population easier to predict and control. When did this psychological warfare start to be used against the citizens of their own countries? Well, I'm sure that many of you can point to potential PSYOPs going back decades. Perhaps the most sceptics related to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. But it would seem that the Brexit vote was the impetus for the British government to identify a potential problem. Cambridge Analytics has been used to influence voter behaviour in favour of Brexit. The problem being that they used the very techniques used in psychological warfare, and thus politicians reach to the psychological warfare to protect their interests. I meant national interests. Shortly afterwards, the initial election of Donald Trump caused an almost identical panic in the US. I seem to remember in both countries Russia were initially blamed for the manipulation, but it would now seem that factions within the US were involved, including former CIA operatives. Who knows what was the aim and who instigated these, but it should reinforce my view that factions within nation states work against each other rather than So have you been influenced by psychological warfare? Undoubtedly. Maybe as our governments insist, this has been by a foreign power such as Russia or China, or as a Muslim I have found it to be India or Israel. But it's much more likely that you've been targeted by your own government. I know you're all thinking that you're much too clever to fall for such manipulation. Well, education makes you more accepting of authority and more likely to believe such psychological manipulation. How else can you explain the medical profession's almost messianic compliance with health regulations that were really a military operation? Nor indeed how the British NHS assisted both my parents to leave this world, or my former friends and academic colleagues turning against me for expressing some doubts about the official narrative. And isn't their hostility towards me for merely being sceptical indicative that yes, we have all been affected by psychological warfare?